the hell is going on? We are back with the MMA Roundtable. A little shorter distance between the last episode than the one before it. We're bringing you roundtables back-to-back weeks, not waiting 3 months to bring you a roundtable, and we got a bunch to talk about. It is the beginning of the year. We had UFC Fight Night 35 this past Wednesday. We, of course, have got a whole week of MMA news to talk about, and, of course, UFC on Fox 10 this Saturday. Let's do it. We're really glad you tuned into the MMA Roundtable today, the 41st edition. It is January 21st, 2014, no matter where you're listening from. It might be 10 p.m. in the UK, it might be 2 if you're over in LA, but it doesn't matter. We're really glad you decided to tune in. And if you are listening live, we always like people to be a part of the conversation. You either can call us, that number is 213-457-3380, or you can tweet us at the MMA Podcast, and we will read your tweet live on the air. Thanks again for tuning in. It is the MMA Roundtable. We do it every Tuesday afternoon, and today we're joined by two of my favorite people across the pond. First and foremost, Ray, how is it going? What do you say? Where can we find you on Twitter and YouTube? And who have you been interviewing? You've had a very successful 2014.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Always love coming on here and breaking down all the latest news with you. We had a great panel last week as well, so hopefully looking forward to getting some of those guys back in the near future. Follow me on Twitter at MMA Mental. I've had a few good interviews this year already, which I'm pleased about. Spoke to Tim Kennedy. He called out that he mentioned that he wanted to fight Michael Bisping, and of course now that fight looks like it's in the works. Obviously shows talking to me helps. Only joking, of course. Spoke to a few of the guys as well. I'm trying to speak to as many of the post-fight winners as I can. So I spoke to a few guys from the UFC event so far this year. Just spoke to Gilbert Smith coming off a big win at MFC. Got a few of the guys booked as well from World Series of Fighting. So check out our YouTube channel, which is MMA Mental.
Definitely, and we are also joined by the incredulous, the stunning, the gorgeous J Jeans, coming from, I don't even know where in the UK, because I don't know anything about geography over there. What the hell is going on, J Jeans?
You missed the word sexy, man. I can't believe you missed sexy. Yeah, everything's good with me. Just chilling out. To be fair, I played a lot of the old UFC game, UFC 3. I played a lot of that this week. I don't really know why, but I guess I'm pumped about the new EA Sports one. But yeah, everything's fine with me. I'm, for the record, Jake, I'm kind of near London when I'm living back home, but the rest of the time I'm kind of living outside Cardiff. If your geography of Britain is good at all, that's in Wales.
Yeah, I have no idea where that is. What fighter do you play the most with as on that UFC video game?
Oh my god, that's putting me on the spot. I'll turn it on now and check the stats, shall I? I'll turn it on and let you know later in the show.
Alright, let us know later on who is used most by J Jeans. For me, I won't lie, I love spamming a lot of head kicks, so I like using, Alistair Overeem, John Jones, Anderson Silva. When I'm back home in Florida, a few of my friends we'll pretty much do Jones versus Silva over and over and over and over and over and over. Until we're too high to look at the television anymore. Let's move on to the stuff we've got for the show. Like I teased at the beginning, we've got UFC on Fox 10 this Saturday. We get a preview. We have a little bit of MMA news we want to talk about. As always, we've got our bonehead of the week and guess that tweet. But first, let's start off with UFC Fight Night 35. It was just about a week ago, last Wednesday in Duluth, Georgia. Wasn't the deepest card ever, but it was still pretty good. Before we get to the actual main card fights, which I do want to talk about one at a time, let's just talk about those first 6 prelim fights all in one bunch. We had 4 lightweight fights. The two that started it off were Beneil Dariush defeating Charlie Brenneman. Pretty big upset there via first round submission. Vince Pichel defeating Garrett Whitley via unanimous decision. Then we had a flyweight match. Louis Smolka defeating Alp Ozkilik via unanimous decision. Trevor Smith defeating Brian Houston via split decision at middleweight. And those last two lightweight fights both ended in unanimous decision. Elias Silverio defeating Isaac Valley Flag, Ramsey Nijam defeating Justin Edwards. Two of these guys Ray has interviewed or is going to interview, so we'll let you fill him in on that. Ray, what stood out? Any fights really make a good impression for you?
Yeah, with regards to the interviews, I've interviewed two of them already, and I've got another two booked. So I've interviewed Beneil Dariush, and I've interviewed Ramsey Nijam, and later on this week I'll be interviewing Trevor Smith and Vince Pichel. So that's all on my my YouTube channel. I thought the prelims were quite good. Obviously, Beneil Dariush, got to give a mention to him. To beat Charlie Brenneman the way he did, of course, he was an underdog going into the fight, and he caught him with a punch and choked him, which was impressive. My personal fight of the night was the flyweight bout between Louis Smolka and Abdulzin Ozkilik. I thought Louis Smolka, I was really impressed with him. I was really impressed with Elias Silveiro. I thought he did a really good job on Isaac Valley Flag. I think he made light work of Valley Flag, who's quite a tough guy, really. And I thought Nijam and Edwards was a good fight as well. So overall, I was impressed with the prelims. I really enjoyed them. Smith and Houston weren't great, but I thought the rest of the prelims was enjoyable.
Jay?
Yeah, Beneil, for sure. He looked absolutely fantastic. I got to say that Alp didn't look as good as we expected from this high-level wrestler, but you've got to give that credit to Smolka. I don't see Smolka going far, but Beneil's got some potential. Yeah, that's really what I took away from that. Vince Pichel is, I don't even know what to say about that guy. He's currently the lowest ranked UFC lightweight with a win, and he's so close to the bottom, even though he's just got a win. I mean, his relevancy has really been questioned, but he's coming off a win, which is brilliant for him.
Word up. In perfect timing, we are also joined by somebody else on the roundtable. Before we get to the first topic, P Money Murder, what the hell is up? Where can we follow you on Twitter, and how are you doing, man?
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm doing fantastic today. You can follow me at Sweet Pappy Jones on Twitter, and you can just catch me lurking the boards everywhere you go. We got the internet going nuts like Paul Wall.
That's right, god damn it. We were talking about the prelims, talked about those 6 fights, the 2 on UFC Fight Pass and the 1 on Fox Sports 1. Were you able to catch the prelims, and did anything stand out for you on those?
Yeah, you know what? I was able to catch the prelims. Oh gosh, I'm trying to think. I forget. I don't even remember what the matches were. I do remember. I want to say, oh gosh, no, I literally just woke up like 5 seconds ago. I can't even call that up for my brain. But no, I do remember there being at least one good fight on the Fight Pass.
Yeah, there was one decent fight, the first round rear naked choke, Beneil Dariush over Charlie Brenneman, but the rest of them, I'm not going to lie, were pretty boring 15-minute unanimous decisions, or the one split decision in the case of the middleweight bout. So yeah, I don't really want to spend any more time talking about the prelims either. Let's move on. Cole Miller defeats Sam Cecilia via second round rear naked choke. Miller is looking really good. You know, after the fight, he ran up to the cage and started yelling at Dana White. I'm not sure exactly what he said, but what did you think of the fight? And more importantly, do you think Cole Miller is a legit featherweight, Jay?
You're probably not the right person to answer this question, because I still can't stand Cole Miller. I'm happy he won. He helped me out a lot for my parlay that failed because of Dustin Ortiz. But anyway, getting back on track. Yeah, he's lost to Steven Seiler, Nam Fan, and Manny Gamburin. Arguably, he should have won the Manny fight, but it's hard to look past those losses. Also, the Nam Fan one was kind of close, but I thought Seiler dominated in all aspects. If you're saying, I can't remember what the exact question was, but his, what was it? is Miller legit at featherweight? Was that your question?
Correct.
He started his career at featherweight, so it's kind of this should be the best he's ever going to get. And in my opinion, he's looked all right. His wins haven't been that notable, and his losses, his losses are there. So 3-3. What else can you say?
Yeah, I hesitate to call Cole Miller legit at 145. It's probably the most advantageous weight class for him. But when you look at some of the names that were mentioned in his loss column, it definitely makes me hesitate to ever call him. Well, I mean, I could call him legit, but certainly not a title contender. He looked great against Sam Cecilia. I know a lot of people who wouldn't even give Cole Miller the time of day in this fight. Just thought Miller was going to get completely ran through, and I could see how they would think that, just because with Cole Miller, part of his problem as well is his inconsistency, trading wins with losses, and you never know which Cole Miller is going to show up. But heck, Cole Miller showed up and looked in real good form this past Wednesday. It was a very good showing on his part. His striking looked as good as it ever has. And, I mean, gosh, just not a whole lot to say. But, yeah, I just feel he's got some inconsistency there that really makes me hesitate in calling him legit at 145.
I enjoyed this fight. I thought Cole Miller did a good job. But at the end of the day, he was fighting Sam Cecilia. Sam Cecilia's not a great competitor at 145. He's a little bit of a journeyman. Miller did what he needed to do. He used his reach to outstrike him, and then when the chance came, he submitted him. I don't think on the back of this, Cole Miller's he's not a title contender. He's a good fighter. He's exciting to watch. I don't mind Cole Miller. I like to watch him fight. It seems every time he fights, he calls somebody different out there. When he fought in the UK, he called out Conor McGregor, and now he's calling out Donald Cerrone. I think he needs to just make his mind up. I don't think Cerrone will drop to 145 anyway, but yeah, he's exciting to watch, but he'll never fight for a title.
Word, yeah, the odds in Vegas of him fighting for that featherweight strap would probably be astronomical if they ever place him, but they probably wouldn't because it's that much of a long shot. Let's move on. The next fight we had flyweight John Moraga defeating Dustin Ortiz via split decision. A lot of people thought Dustin won, but in the eyes of the judges, John won, and that's all that matters. John's got a very, very decent record. His last fight was actually for the UFC Flyweight Championship back in July. He lost via 5th round armbar to Demetrius Johnson. His only other career loss was to John Dodson, who a lot of people think is a top 3 or 4 flyweight too. What do you think about the fight first? But second, John Moraga, is he getting ready for another title run, or as the UFC brings in more and more flyweights, do you think he's going to get knocked back down the ladder? I don't know. With all of these guys like Zach Makovsky, you have Ian McCall, who still hasn't gotten his flyweight shot. He's going to be fighting Brad Pickett, I believe, in March. Do you think in the next couple of years we see John Moraga fight for that flyweight belt again, Patrick?
I could see Moraga getting in there for the belt again. However, his performance against Dustin Ortiz does leave a little bit to be desired. I will go so far as to say I believe Moraga won that fight solely on damage and effective striking. I mean, Dustin Ortiz, he had all the top control in the world. But it just that was about all he had in that fight, and that was his only chance in that fight. And he got the hands put on him in that fight in at least one of the rounds. I know it was incredibly close, and going by the unified rule scoring, and which is very open to interpretation, is part of the problem with MMA scoring. You can certainly score it either way. I saw it going for Moraga, but we saw that gap in his wrestling game that's really going to prevent him from competing at the very, very top level. Like you mentioned, we've got our Zach Makovskys, you've got your Ali Bagotinovs, a lot of these guys coming in with just very well-rounded games, and I love where the flyweight division is going right now. It's so awesome. So many contenders, so many prospects. It's really looking good. Moraga, he's certainly in the mix. He's definitely easily in the top 5 right now. But I think it really depends on what happens with his grappling game if he gets back to a title shot and if he hangs around in that top 5, top 10 for a long time.
I actually thought that Dustin Ortiz won the fight. It was a very close fight. The first 2 rounds were clearly in one for Ortiz, one for Moraga. But I kind of favoured Ortiz in round 3. But it was a very, very close fight. That flyweight division is looking pretty stacked now. I think to kind of clinch a title, you've not only just got to win, but you've got to win excitingly. I wouldn't with the history with Pickett and Demarcus Johnson, of course. Demetrius Johnson, with Pickett having a win over him. I think if Pickett beats McCall in an exciting fashion, he'll get a title. He'll get the next title shot, or he'll get a title shot. I don't think we'll be seeing Moraga fight for the title in the near future. He's got a lot of work to do because it just wasn't. It wasn't the kind of performance which you look at and think, wow, I need to see that rematch. So I don't think we'll be seeing that in the immediate future, personally.
I have to agree with Ray here. I thought Ortiz won that fight. I also was pretty confident in, as I mentioned to earlier, my parlay of Ortiz, Miller and Rockhold, and that was the fight that I had the most questions about, and I thought Ortiz won that. I was gutted with the decision, as you can imagine, especially the split decision one. I thought Ortiz did enough in that 3rd round to secure the fight. But the judges are what they are, and they're idiots. But moving on from that, as for Moraga getting a title shot, I don't see it happening anytime soon. I mean, as Ray suggested, you've got to be exciting, and he's not been the most exciting fighter so far, and he did lose. I mean, DJ managed to finish him, although it was in the last few moments of the fight. He still pulled it off. You've got quite a few contenders lined up in this division. This division is starting to get a bit stronger now, so it's going to take more than a couple of UFC wins to get that title shot. I mean, you've got McCall Pickett as probably the next title shot is going to go to John Lineker versus Ali Bag of Tuna. But you got enough people to keep Moraga to the back of the pack, especially when you got people like Scott Jorgensen, who all they need to do is turn it into a 15-minute wrestle fest. We've seen his weakness. He might be a college wrestler or whatever, but he's been out-wrestled twice now, in my opinion.
Word. Let's keep on trucking. Go to the next fight. Yoel Romero defeating Derek Brunson via round 3 technical knockout. Actually was a very interesting fight, just in that Yoel was kind of getting handled by Brunson up until the 3rd round. Then he just came out like gangbusters. I've said it a million times, but it's very, very, very impressive how a Olympic silver medalist in freestyle wrestling has gotten into MMA so late in his career, and B, he's knocking everyone out. You know, when you think of a wrestler, you think of a guy who lays and prays, a guy who stalls. He's not stalling at all. We saw that in the 3rd round against Derek Brunson. In my opinion, was a pretty late stoppage. I mean, just was landing these terrible blows to the kidney of Derek Brunson. But my question, aside from breaking down this fight, is can Yoel compete with the top middleweights in the UFC? He is getting a little bit older. He's 36 now, and you've got to wonder, a guy who's got such beastly stand-up and might be the best wrestler in the entire UFC, could he possibly move up and fight, a guy like Jacare, a guy like Machida, a guy like the winner of the main event on this card, Luke Rockhold? Could he compete with those top middleweights in the UFC, Ray?
First thing we've got to ask is, that's not the question we all need to know. The question we need to know is, did Yoel Romero shit himself? Have you all seen the picture?
That's actually a very pressing issue too. I'm pretty sure he pooped. He I believe was asked afterwards at the press conference if he shat his pants, and Dana White said, "All right, enough with shitty questions." But he claimed it was sweat. It was sweat. I think was the direct quote. But I don't know. Like, he was wearing purple shorts, which is a question mark to begin with. We don't know whether like the water really made those shorts soaking wet, but it looked, I don't know, it looked borderline brown, Ray. I think, I mean, you know, it's not something to be ashamed of. I think Chris Weidman recently fessed up on the MMA Hour once to shitting himself in training. So yeah, you know, just own up, admit it's shit. But yeah, I do think it's shit. Do you think it was shit, Ray?
Well, I think the real person that's grateful for all this is CR, because everyone's forgot about his fart now from the other week. It's all on Yoel Romero now. Yeah, it looked like he pooed himself to me, to be fair. But yeah, back to the fight. It was a really brutal fight. I mean, Brunson was winning that fight, and you talked about Romero's wrestling, but I think it's fair to say Brunson had out wrestled Romero. But the both of them, it's like every punch they landed was a power punch. There's no jabbing with them. It's just haymaker after haymaker after haymaker. The fight was rightfully stopped. I don't know if it was a late stoppage, because it's hard to. He was hitting the body, but it's hard to know how much a fighter can take. Brunson was covering up, and the ref was right to stop it. And Brunson looked an absolute bloody mess after the fight. I thought the ref did a good job on that fight. Can Romero compete with the top guys in that division? No, I think he's not going to go much higher than where he's at now. I mean, he lost. He lost the first 2 rounds of that fight, but he's pulled it out of the bag to get the win. I can't see him. He's not. He'll never be top 10 in my opinion. Mind you saying that, Francis Carmont's top 10, so I suppose anything's possible.
Oh, sorry guys, I'm muted up. The fight itself, it was a deserving fight of the night winner. The shit stain. It's funny that he learnt the word sweat. To be fair, that was weird, because he's Cuban. He didn't seem to know much. So clearly his corner after the fight were like, "You need to say it was sweat." So he kind of learnt what that word is. That's my feeling. Anyway, I think his wrestling is probably the best in the division, but he's seen that lay and pray isn't the most exciting. He is a wrestler after all, but he just goes. The reason why Brunson out wrestled him was really because he's throwing flying knees, throwing head kicks. He does not give a shit. He's 36 years old or something. He's just there for the money now. He realizes that the money is in this kickboxing, high kicks, spinning back kicks. He realized that's where the money's at. To go out there with a win is just incredible. The guy reminds me very much of Kung Lee with his wrestling background, but great striking, and that's the fight we want to see him in next. I don't care how long the layoff is going to be for either of those guys, but that's the fight I want to see. I think it'd just be absolutely incredible.
Well, that fight was obviously amazing. That was such an awesome comeback, and I was very pardon me, sorry about that. I was very pleased to see how that went, considering I put a huge chunk down on Romero. I was having a tough time with the wagers on this event, and I said, you know what? Only thing I'm sure of is Romero beating Brunson, and holy shit, am I glad he came and pulled out that 3rd round TKO. I was praying in my head it would look like the Honey Marks fight, get that late stoppage. He came through. I don't know if he shit himself. If he did, I can't really blame him, because that head kick he took from Derek Brunson, I mean, shit, I thought he had internally decapitated himself or something like that. That was just a crazy hard shot. Oh, pardon me, got something in my throat. As far as Yoel Romero in the top of the division, he's got a great skill set. He's got really great striking, I think. And, of course, his wrestling credentials speak for themselves. So he's got the tools. I think the only thing that that really hinders him is just his frame. He's a short middleweight, especially mentioning guys like Francis Carmon, who were like about 6'4". I want to say Yoel Romero's coming in at like 5'9", 5'10". I mean, he's going to be hindered by that. So I don't know how far he can go. Again, I wouldn't be surprised to see him hang around top 5, top 10, but he's definitely got the deck stacked against him just due to his physical stature.
Word, you doing Doing good? You rip the bong a little hard over there in Cali?
Oh, Jake, you got me. You got me too good. I'm sorry. I had the gravity going. It was a gravity situation, and I was not able to catch my breath in time. But I am good now. Lungs have stopped seizing. Whew, ready to go. 110%, my man.
Hell yeah, that is what the MMA podcast and MMA Roundtable are all about. Mixed martial arts and big hits of marijuana. I'm glad to hear it. Let's move on. The co-main event, as I like to call it, third fight down. It was a bantamweight fight. Honestly, it probably should have been the co-main event. Now that I look at it, it probably should have been over Brad Tavares and Lawrence Larkin as the co-main. But anyway, it was Dillashaw and Mike Easton. They fought to a unanimous decision, 30-27. TJ motherfucking Dillashaw, y'all. I think after this fight, the question for him changed from is he going to fight for the bantamweight title to when is he going to fight for the bantamweight title. He looked absolutely, even in the third round, after he put it to Easton, rounds 1 and 2, where we see a lot of fighters coast when they know they've got the unanimous decision in the bag. Dillashaw kept putting it on Easton. Easton, is not a slouch whatsoever. He's a black belt standing up in Taekwondo. He's a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu under known rapist Lloyd Irvin, and had been on a pretty incredible roll. I think he won like 8 in a row before losing now his third straight fight to Dillashaw. Before Dillashaw, he lost a unanimous decision to Rafael Assunção and split decision to Brad Pickett. Dillashaw, though, looked absolutely great. He also has a split decision loss to Rafael Assunção, but other than that, he's won the 4 before that. Looking really good. Probably, if he rattles off a few more wins, he could get a title shot as early as late 2014, probably early to mid 2015. I'm not gonna pose the question to you all, though. How long until we see Tyler Jeffrey Dillashaw get a title shot in the UFC, Jay?
I think he's 2 fights away now. First up is the winner of Wineland versus Jabin. How would you say that, Jake? I know you're a fan of that guy. Yves Jabin?
Yves Jabin, I think, yeah.
Yeah, that's close enough. After that, Michael McDonald will probably be back and be coming off a win. So I reckon those are his next 2 fights, and those are the 2 to get him a title fight. Eddie Wineland after a win over Eve, and then Michael McDonald over a win over somebody. Back-to-back wins should get him a title fight, in my eyes.
Yeah, definitely. That just depends on how the division shakes out. Barral has already gone through just about everybody. His first defense of the undisputed title is going to be a rematch against Uriah Faber. He already fought Uriah Faber to win the interim title. So, depending on how the division shakes out, Dillashaw, he could get that title shot sooner rather than later. I certainly don't want to rush it on his end. It seems like I can still see him getting knocked out by John Dodson in my head, but I think in part of that is what makes his fight against Mike Easton so impressive. That fight, my God, he went everywhere. The technicality with which he picked apart Mike Easton is something I quite honestly don't know that I've ever seen on that level in the UFC. Perhaps outside from Dennis Seaver versus Nam Phan, which was also just a lopsided just gang rape of a fucking beatdown. It was just an amazing performance from Dillashaw. I cannot ever think of a single fighter who has made such an improvement in their skill set all the way around. TJ Dillashaw straight up blew my fucking mind. It was an amazing performance from him. Big kudos. I can't wait to see what's next for him.
Yeah, it was a great fight, very exciting fight. I think TJ Dillashaw at the moment is one of the most exciting fighters to look out for in the bantamweight division, and the bantamweight division is exciting as it is. I'm not normally a fan of Mike Easton. I find his style a little bit tedious, but this was a great matchup. You talk about TJ in the title shot. The thing you got to consider is that if Uriah Hall beats Hennenbrow, I don't think he will, but if he does, I don't think Dillashaw will fight Uriah Hall, Uriah Faber, because they're obviously training partners. But yeah, Dillashaw's right up there. Maybe even one more win after this. I don't quite know who else is in the picture really. I mean, you talk about Yves Rabin and Eddie Wineland, or Jay mentioned them too, but for me, they're not in the title picture. Wineland's coming off the loss. Yves Rabin's not really beat anyone worth anything really, to be fair, in that division. So I don't know at the moment off the top of my head who else is up near the top. McDonald's coming off the loss, of course, to Faber. But yeah, I mean, Dillashaw is certainly, he may even be the next person in line after the Faber fight, because there's not many else up there that's standing out at the minute like he is, and he is such an exciting fighter.
Word up. Let's move on to the co-main event. Like I mentioned, Brad Tavares and Lorenz Larkin. Brad Tavares winning the unanimous decision, 29-28 across the board. Tavares, you look at his record. I mean, dude is 12-1. He's racked up 5 straight wins in the UFC's middleweight division, which I think ranks in the top 5 for longest streaks ever at 185. Pretty standard. Is Brad a real deal middleweight? Can he get into the top 10 and stay there? Or is this just a case of him getting lackluster opponents, and once he gets decent ones, he's not going to do as well? P-Money?
That's a great question, Jake, and I've been wondering that in my mind for some time now. Brad Tavares, for the life of me, I want to say I talked about this last week. I just can never pick a fight with him correctly. I never have been able to. I've always sold him short. I don't know if it was time on The Ultimate Fighter or what it was. Maybe I saw something there I didn't like, but I just always have had a really hard time picking him. I picked Larkin to beat him. I absolutely thought Larkin had what it took to beat him. But Tavares, he keeps showing up better and better, just a little bit better each fight. This fight, his striking just really seemed on point, seemed as good as it's ever been. I think he's really developing himself. Unlike Yoel Romero, Brad Tavares has a frame a little more suitable for middleweight, at least something that I think would be more advantageous for middleweight. I want to say off the top of my head, he's coming in around 6 foot, maybe 6'2", something like that. I can't really say for sure, but he's a bigger middleweight. I'd say around where you want to be, a little more on the muscular side for 185. As far as if he's bum status or a legit fighter at this point, I gotta say he's legit. I'm just keep being wrong with him. I keep thinking this guy's better than him. He's gonna get beat, and he keeps getting it done in impressive fashion. So I guess I gotta say Brad Tavares is the real deal.
I'm gonna disagree with Patrick a little bit. I don't think he's a bum. He's certainly not a bum. But does anyone else find his fighting style really, really boring to watch? I mean, he takes these fighters that are quite explosive and quite exciting, and he did it with Tom Watson as well, and he beats them by shutting them down. I mean, me and Jay talked a little bit about this card on the build-up, and I said to Jay that this fight has got stand and tag written all over it, and for me, that's what this fight was. It was stand and tag. It wasn't an exciting fight to watch. Tavares won, but I'm not coming away from that saying I can't wait to see Tavares fight next. I mean, he is beating guys who don't expect him to beat, and he has put a good little resume together. But I'm yet to be excited for a Brad Tavares fight, and I don't really care who he fights next based on this performance. He's not a bum, but he's not the real deal either for me.
He is boring as shit, Ray. I'll agree there.
Yeah, I think Ray's right. Definitely a bit of stand and tag in his last fight. Looking at his records, he's had 6 UFC fights. All 6 of them have gone the distance. 5 of those being wins. You guys are right when you're saying that he might not be a bum status, but he's definitely not been the most exciting fighter recently. And back on the tough season, yeah, his Muay Thai was looking like that was going to be his thing. But recently, I don't even know. I don't know where he stands in the division, and I don't think his wins are that impressive, really. I mean, you got Dong Yang, Ricky Fukuda, Bubba McDaniels. Tom Watson hasn't had the best UFC career either, and his performances not being exciting doesn't make him look good either. I think Tyler's later makes a lot of sense. If Tyler's can get it to the ground, it's pretty much lights out for Brad Tavares. If Tavares has got his standing, Laters is going to be the one pressing the action. So Tavares, that's almost a fight where Tavares will have to look for the finish, because every second you remain standing with Tyler's is another second he'll go for a takedown. As we saw with the Anderson Silva fight, this guy's happy to lie on the floor, so Tavares has got a chance to let a guy lie on the floor in front of him or try and fight him. I think that's his next fight either way. I'm not too excited about him fighting, and that's probably why I wanted to see Thales later. He could be, if he was on a 5-0 streak with 5 finishes, we could be giving him the I don't even know who's on a 5-0 streak. We could be talking about him like a Jacare fight, that kind of thing. But no, he hasn't been excited. So no, I think he's starting to look like a bum. Yeah.
Word, yeah, I would actually really love to see a fight between he and Tallis. Both have won their last 5. Let's get to the main event though. Luke Rockhold defeating Costa Philippou via first round TKO, KO kick to the body, and then followed that up with strikes at 2:31 to cap off that UFC Fight Night 35 card. Both of them were coming off losses. Costa lost to Francis Carmont. He now has 2 in a row. Luke Rockhold getting back in the win column after losing in May to Vitor Belfort. And Luke is now actually 10-1 in his last 11 fights. His only loss coming to Belfort. And aside from the fight, obviously, my question is Luke Rockhold the real deal? Currently, he's number 6 at the middleweight division. Beating Costa didn't really do anything for him. Obviously, you've got the titans of the middleweight division: Lyoto, Jacare, Vitor, Anderson, Weidman. We're just in a few weeks now going to see a lot of sorting out at middleweight. We're going to see Lyoto fight Gegard Mousasi in the middle of February, and we're also going to see Jacare take on Francis Carmont. Who would you like to see next for Luke? And is he a legit middleweight? Could you see him eventually fighting for the title? Personally, I think it's a little early to say who he fights next, with all that sorting out to be done the middle of next month. I think it could make a lot of sense if we end up seeing Weidman and Vitor fight in May or June. We also could see a Lyoto versus Jacare fight during the summer, and then the winners of those 2 fights obviously fighting for the middleweight strap at the end of 2013. But I'm having trouble thinking of who would make the most sense for Rockhold if that happened. And personally, I don't think he fights for the middleweight belt anytime soon, just because all those people are so legit. I don't know. What do you all think, Ray?
Firstly, for me, this was a huge mismatch. I mean, again, me and Jay talked briefly about this, and I said to Jay this was a mismatch, and I think he agreed. Rockhold is absolutely pure quality. He shouldn't be fighting someone like Costa Philippou, and he showed that in that fight. I don't care who you are, and especially at this level we're at now in the UFC, to beat somebody like that in such dominating fashion. This wasn't a one-punch knockout. This wasn't, he threw something and caught it. These were well-timed body shots. He knew exactly what he was doing with those kicks. And Philippou, I mean, he was wincing after the first few, and he kept on throwing them. I mean, I was super, super impressed with Rockhold. Not the fact he beat Philippou, but I've used this statement before. It's not always the fact you win, it's how you win. For me, Rockhold made a statement in that division, because he beat someone he was expected to beat. Yeah, no qualms about that. But it's not the fact he beat him, it's how he beat him. And those body kicks were absolutely beautiful. Who should he fight next? As far as I'm concerned, Luke Rockhold is right up there at the top end of the division. You've got to remember, from his days in Strikeforce, he's already got wins over Jacare and Tim Kennedy, who are 2 of the guys that are up near the top. Possible opponents, I'd more than happily see him face the winner of Machida and Mousasi. If Michael Bisping was to beat Kennedy, I'd happily see him fight Bisping. But as far as I'm concerned, Rockhold's right up there in title contention. One more win over one of those names I've just mentioned, and Rockhold deserves a title shot.
Yeah, he looked fantastic as we expected. Philippou, if we're talking about Brad Tavares being a bum, there is. Philippou's looking like another level of bum. Anyway, I'm sure I'll get onto that with my bonehead of the week. Moving on. As for what's next for Rockhold, the UFC love putting together guys who have won versus another guy, two guys coming off wins. And in this division, that's an absolute nightmare to sort out because the lowest you can go is, as I mentioned earlier in this episode, Tyler Zlates and Tim Boach. Those are the two guys who are coming off a win, who are in the higher tier of the division, who fight regularly and aren't currently booked to fight. It's a really very stacked division right now. I mean, Mark Munoz could be added to that mix, but he's coming off a knockout loss. Ray's mentioned some great opponents there, Bisping, Kennedy, a rematch with them, Jacare, a rematch with him. But as for who's next, it's really very, very hard to say. Maybe I could even see him fighting Brad Tavares just to end that streak, just to keep him active and end that streak, and that'll be it. He'll be done 2 months later. He can move on to another fight whilst we get some of these winners coming off wins or losses, and then he can get his name back in the division. But right now, it's a choice of whether he wants to wait for a top name or whether he wants to stay active. And I'd like to see him stay active, considering as he's a person who gets injured quite a bit.
Jay, I agree 1,000% there as far as Luke Rockhold wanting to stay active. I would love to see him matched up with Michael Bisping. I think that is the matchup to make. I think that would be fireworks in the cage. I don't think there would be either quit from either of those guys. It'd be a great technical striking battle, and they're both great everywhere that fight would go. However, Bisping is matched up with Kennedy at the moment, so if we sit back and see how that fight plays out, and then it's another couple months, and then you're looking at Luke Rockhold sitting out another 6 months after he was just out for like a year pretty much. So that may not be ideal, at least just time frame wise. So looking around, I don't really see where he can go with this. I mean, I'm no matchmaker. Joe Silva, he is the man. I can only speculate as to who he's going to face next, but again, 185 is looking, I don't want to say shallow these days, but it's definitely looking up for grabs now that Anderson Silva is out of the division for the foreseeable future. It's a fucking free for all, man. This 185 thing, it's anybody's game.
Word up, yeah. Luke Rockhold, his kickboxing is really, the body kick is a technique I think is underutilized, and you see certain guys who just own it. I mean, Anthony Pettis, the lightweight champion, we saw him blast Bendo with a couple of kicks, which got him to the point where he could armbar him to win. You have guys like Dennis Seaver who have made body kicks their move, and Luke Rockhold, I love seeing the body kick in action. And I think that actually does it for us breaking down UFC Fight Night 35. So before we get to the news, it is that time of the show. Let's get to our boneheads.
Boom, 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 boom. Now tell me what you gonna do, but it ain't nowhere to run. Judgment comes for you, and judgment comes for you. Tell me what you gonna do, but it ain't nowhere to hide. Judgment comes for you, 'cause it's gonna come for you.
Shout out to the Bone Thugs. By the way, I've always got to play the full 20-minute start because this is a beautiful song. My bonehead of the week. Usually I try and keep it MMA-centric. We all try and keep it MMA-centric. But, I've got to use it for an excuse to play this clip. My bonehead of the week is Michael Crabtree and all of the Twitter critics. Take it away, Richard Sherman.
Richard, let me ask you the final play. Take me through.
YouTube, of course, being very clutch and not wanting to buffer all the way, as YouTube likes to do. Alright, let's try that again.
Richard, let me ask you the final play. Take me through it.
Well, I'm the best corner in the game. When you try me with a sorry receiver like Crabtree, that's the result you're going to get. Don't you ever talk about me.
Who was talking about you?
Crabtree, don't you open your mouth about the best. I'm going to set it for you real quick. LOB.
All right, before... And Joe, back over to you.
And And my bonehead goes to both Crabtree for talking a lot of shit to someone who shut him down the entire game. But more importantly, all the people on Twitter who are giving Sherman all of this about, oh, you're a thug, blah, 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 this and that, you're horrible, you're not good for the game. We get closer and closer to the game every season, whether it's these on-the-field interviews, whether it's specials that chronicle teams in the off-season, chronicles teams on, week to week. And we want to get this close to the game, but then when someone wants to give their real emotions, you want to criticize them for it. If you said anything shitty about Richard Sherman in the last week, you are my bonehead of the week. Ray?
I'm going something a bit more traditional. I'm going to go for one of the guys who fought at World Series of Fighting, if you want to call it fighting. It was Cody Bollinger. I mean, the guy's coming off the tough series where he made a complete and utter arse of himself because he broke the one rule that you can't break, and he failed to make weight. All we saw all the time was clips of him eating, and then of course he missed weight, didn't fight. He gets another big opportunity on a big show, and he's fighting against Tyson Nam, who's, for the most part, an exciting bantamweight, and the pair of them just stand and tag for 50 minutes. I mean, even Baz Bruton, who was calling the action, was talking about how boring and unimpressive the fight was. So for not making the most of a second opportunity in the limelight, my bonehead of the week is Cody Bollinger.
Jay?
My bonehead this week is the man in the main event who got kicked to the liver and quit, Constantino Philippou. Right, I'm sure I discussed this before, but Constantino Philippou was training at Sarah and Ray Longo's. He was an absolute beast. He didn't have the best wrestling in the world, but he had sorted his boxing. He had sorted the reach out. The reach is a very important thing. He got it down to a T. His training with Chris Weidman, one of the best wrestlers, in their training, it's probably clear that Constantino Philippou every day would have gone in there and got wrestled. So eventually, he learned where to be. He learned his reach. He learned his rhythm. He learned how to avoid these takedowns, even without wrestling. He's absolutely phenomenal. Then Chris Weidman, Chris Weidman starts getting pushed to this contender status, and Constantino Philippou, I think in his own words, he said he saw the writing on the wall, so he decided, I want to progress forward with my career, and I want a UFC championship. So as a result, he went to Belmore Kickboxing Academy. Oh my God! And clearly, as his last two fights have shown, he's lost his range, he's lost his rhythm, he's lost his reach. He's now up against the elements, and Belmore Kickboxing Academy can't even tell you how to catch or how to block a leg kick to the body. So I don't know where his boxing's gone anymore, but he can't even take a punch. And I thought chin and heart wasn't a factor, but apparently training at a bad place also reduces your chin and heart. So whatever. Constantino Philippou, you're a bonehead, full stop. Whether you're the bonehead of the week or not, that you're my bonehead of the week. That's my nomination.
P Money.
Fantastic, gentlemen. Great nods. Myself personally, I have to go with the World Series of Fighting as a whole of an organization, primarily just because, first of all, World Series of Fighting, they're second to third tier MMA at best. Let's face it, it's all UFC and Bellator washouts. It is DVR material. Nobody watches World Series of Fighting live. Nobody is kicking themselves when they miss World Series of Fighting live. Nobody. So, of course, I DVR the replay of World Series of Fighting, and you know what? I set my DVR to record 5 minutes beyond the scheduled time frame that had been designated, and it didn't even get the entire Anthony Johnson-Mike Kyle fight. It didn't even come close to getting the Justin Gaethje fight. I mean, it's fucking ridiculous. I heard they had their first lightweight title fight this weekend. I wouldn't fucking know. I didn't see it, even though I adjusted my DVR knowing this shit's going to happen. But anyways, I'll tell you what, and that's a sad thing. I missed their first ever lightweight title fight, and I really don't fucking care. And I love MMA. I fucking breed this shit. It's ridiculous. And I don't know. it just says a lot to their product, I feel. And for that and a slew of whole other reasons, the World Series of Fighting as an organization, y'all are my bonehead of the week.
I really got to give my vote to Costa Philippou here. I've heard a lot of stuff. I heard Brendan Schaub talk about on The Fighter and the Kid how back and I'm sorry if Chris said this back on another roundtable. I forget if he said on the roundtable or the MMA podcast, but it bears repeating. Schaub said that Philippou was backstage. And, most fighters will warm up and get loose, spend 30 minutes to an hour just, shadow boxing, stretching. 5 minutes before Costa had to walk out, he just stood up, stretched his neck, and was like, all right, let's do this, and walked out. The guy really doesn't seem that into fighting, and if you want to be in the UFC, it's got to be something you're at least interested in doing. So my vote goes to Costa. Ray?
Yeah, I'm going to follow you, Jake. I'm going to vote for Costa as well. I mean, I really enjoyed watching Costa Philippou fight when he was training with Matt Serra and Ray Longo, especially his performance against Tim Boach. And then he come out against Francis Carmon, and it was just absolutely pathetic. And it dropped even worse against Luke Rockhold. So yeah, my vote goes to Costa Philippou.
I'm going to go with Cody Bollinger in this one. I hated the guy on Tough. He couldn't make weight. Nothing's going to change. I'm always going to dislike this guy. Yeah, I don't mean to be offensive, but does Cody Bollinger to anybody look like Cletus the Slack-jawed yokel?
Yes,
a little bit.
A little bit, yeah, definitely. The resemblance is there, and like I said, the nominations are great. Crabtree and the Twitter critics, I'm with you, Jake. They can all go fuck themselves. Sherman wasn't cursing. He's not throwing up gang signs. Come on, grow up. And Cody Bollinger, of course, douche of the century. Cletus, a slackjaw yokel lookalike. But I have to go with Costa Philippou in this one. I have to agree with you guys. He's got to be the bonehead of the week. I mean, we saw that follow-up body kick. The body kick that quote-unquote finished it was like pure toes. How are you going to fucking drop to a fucking body kick that lands all toe? Come on, homie. Bonehead of the week.
Word up. Well, I believe that makes Costa Philippou our bonehead of the week. I almost stopped the recording. That would have been bad. I need to pause the iTunes. Jesus Christ. I partook a little too much in that legal shit. I am hearing a little bit of an echo. If someone's on speakerphone, you might want to mute up. That brings us to the news. And the biggest bit of news over the week really was George St-Pierre talking about the UFC. It seems like he is on a bit of a crusade against the UFC, which if you would have told me a few months ago that Dana White and George St-Pierre would be feuding, I would have told you to get the fuck out of here. But George St-Pierre is saying that one of the main reasons he decided to take time off and quit for a while was that the UFC was a little too lenient as far as the drug policies went. They were ignoring doping policies, and GSP didn't at all like the whole thing about them not backing him with the third-party drug sponsorship. I'll save my thoughts for the last, but do you buy GSP's reasoning of saying that one of the reasons he quit was that Zuffa was too lenient testing fighters, or do you think it's just sour grapes with the whole bit of Dana White, saying he thought Johnny won pretty outspokenly after the fight? And him just not really, wanting to admit being wrong about the whole Vada, which I don't know if there is a wrong and a right, just something about it. I'm not buying his full reasoning. Jay?
I don't know. GSP's got a mind of his own. With the alien thing, I think that came out. He's definitely a unique personality. As for the doping, I don't know. It's impossible to say. I mean, it sounds like from Dana, these guys get tested, and when they go to international countries where they can't, where the commissions don't naturally test the fighters, it becomes an issue where the UFC test every single fighter on the card. I mean, the UFC do their own dope testings, and they caught Bigfoot out, and the issue with Bigfoot is they did multiple tests on him because, from what I've heard, if you've tested positive before, you're added to a list and you get tested more times if you're in the co-main or main event, something along those lines. So GSP, everybody's fought has been tested extensively. Most likely, he is the champion after all. And I think the issue here was he wanted to go for one, like VADA or something like that, and Hendricks was like, "No, I'd rather do WADA or another promotion." And the UFC didn't really agree to either. And he wanted the UFC to side with him, but the UFC are happy doing their own thing. So I don't really know. GSP, Dana, drugs, whatever. It's a crazy situation.
Yeah, and like they always say, the truth usually lies somewhere in the middle. I believe we can only just speculate on this unless some sort of hard evidence comes out, but I really don't think that'll be the case. I don't think any of us would have a hard time imagining that there is a problem with performance-enhancing drugs and mixed martial arts. I mean, sweet Jesus, we've seen so many people get popped since the sport's inception and since regulation came to the sport, and people get busted for performance-enhancing drugs in every sport, be it a contact sport, non-contact sport. It's all about getting them reps in at the gym, homie. It's all about getting your time up, getting that training up, reducing that recovery time. So naturally, what athlete is not going to find that appealing? There's going to be people in every sport doing it. Whether the UFC is completely turning a blind eye or maybe being easy on it, like GSP is inferring. Again, that's where we can only speculate. But fuck, I find it all very shocking. Like you guys have mentioned, nobody really saw this thing coming out. I mean, this looks like this could be a bigger rift than Randy Couture had with Dana White.
For me, I think the biggest thing that I take from this, I don't know, who's right and who's wrong and what's true and what's not, but I think the biggest thing that I take from this is that we won't see GSP again in the UFC. I mean, we were led to believe he was taking a break, but with him being so vocal and so critical of things that I'm sure the UFC doesn't want publicised, regardless of what's going on, even if it's not true, it's still bad publicity for the UFC, and they don't want that. So I don't think we'll be seeing GSP in the UFC ever again. I think that's it. He's done now. And it's a shame, I think, for GSP because, I think people need to remember him for what he achieved as a fighter. And no one really wants to remember all this petty stuff. But if this is the last thing that he leaves behind, people still talk now about Randy Couture's, petty feud with UFC, if you like. Where it got to the stage where he couldn't even corner his son. Yet Randy Couture, was an amazing fighter and he achieved so much in the sport, or achieved so much in the UFC. But that's kind of put to one side because people think about the end. And I just think that's what GSP's doing for himself now. I think he should have just let things go, gone away, did what he needed to do, and hopefully return. But now all people are going to be talking about is all this petty stuff, which I think is a shame, really.
Yeah, I think it's all sour grapes over the whole WADA-VADA thing. I mean, he said from the get-go the only reason he wanted to do it is because he wanted to show the world that he wasn't doping. Well, that's what he did. He did the VADA testing, came out with a press release before the fight saying, "Look, here are our two documents from the middle of me training, saying I tested clean." But we heard so much sketchy stuff about GSP's manager talking to WADA, being like, "Oh, well, what substances are you gonna test for?" I mean, how much more of an incriminating question could you ask? I don't know. GSP, he's shown in the past that he's not above taking a little bit of his dignity out of the sport. He's greased up. There's video of him greasing up, and if he's willing to do that, why isn't he willing to roid up? there are pictures of him training, and it looks like he's just got an obvious HGH gut. I don't know. I think he did use in the past. I don't think he uses anymore. But this whole reasoning, I really think, is sour grapes. Let's move on, though. World Series of Fighting 8. It was the card this past Saturday. Unfortunately, we didn't have a UFC card this past Saturday, but of the next 9 Saturdays, 8 of them have UFC events scheduled, so that's going to be fun. But this Saturday, we had the World Series of Fighting 8. Jessica Aguilar, Anthony Rumble Johnson, and Justin Gaethje all win impressively in the first round. Did you watch? What are your thoughts on the World Series of Fighting? Pat, you talked a little bit about it in the Bonehead of the Week, but did you watch a good amount of this World Series of Fighting 8 card?
I did get to watch a good amount of it. Just the only thing I missed was that lightweight championship fight. And what I did see, I mean, it was fairly entertaining. It's what you're going to get with what are essentially squash matches that we're getting. I mean, Jessica Aguilar was taking on a fighter who was 4-0, who put up a decent fight for the however many minutes she was in the fight. But it was really what you'd expect. And then, you had, I think, Baboon versus Macaco, Jorge Patino versus... brain fart. Versus Luis Palomino. That's who they are. That was a good little scrap, little back and forth. But I mean, it's World Series of Fighting. You got middle of the road fighters and decent prospects in mismatches, and it's only got so much appeal for me. It was okay.
I enjoyed it. I thought there was some good fights. I've been quite critical, of course, of the Bollinger Tyson Nam fight. I didn't enjoy that matchup, but the rest of the fights were quite good to watch. I see where Patrick's come in with them being squash matches. They were all quite quick wins, but some of them you felt maybe could have gone the other way. I mean, Johnson and Kyle wasn't obvious. I thought maybe Kyle was capable of getting the upset. We'd seen Kyle do well in the past, but I mean, Johnson does look a beast at 205. It's mad to think he once fought at 170 in the UFC. I was really impressed with Justin Gaethje. I don't know if I'm saying that right. I know the guy he weren't fighting. The guy he was fighting wasn't that well known, but again, it's not the fact he won. It was how he won. I mean, he was literally throwing everything: punches, kicks, spinning elbows. That was pretty impressive. Jessica Aguilar, she made light work of her opponent. The fight that Patrick mentioned, Luis Palomino, he looked pretty impressive in that fight. I mean, everything he threw, he looked powerful. How Patino lasted as long as he did, I don't know. But I want to mention as well, another event that happened over the weekend was on Friday night, which was on Access TV, which was MFC 39. That was a pretty good event. There were some good fights on that. Going off topic a little bit, Gilbert Smith versus Jason South was a really exciting back and forth fight. There was a strange fight as well for the lightweight title. Tom Gallicino versus, going off memory now, it was Jason something, and my mind's gone blank. And it was what made this fight unusual was it was for the lightweight title, and yet if one guy won, he got the title, and if the other guy won, he didn't. And the reason behind it was when he weighed in, instead of weighing 155 pounds, he weighed 155.2 pounds, and because of the ruling in that state in Canada, he wasn't given 2 hours to cut that extra 0.2 pounds. So Tom Gallicino actually won the fight, but he wasn't crowned the champion. It was absolutely ridiculous. And then the main event was Anthony Hamilton, who had coming off a big head kick win from before, and he had a really impressive win over Daryl Schoonover, tough veteran. That was a pretty close fight. Well, no, it went 5 rounds, but it was pretty one-sided. Hamilton pretty much controlled the fight. But I mean, I watched both those events this weekend. I enjoyed both of them. But I'd rather have had, of course, a UFC, and I'm certainly looking forward to the next 9 weeks and 8 events. I think Jake said that does excite me.
I'm unfortunate that I didn't get the chance to catch any of this, really. The only fight I happened to stumble across on the internet was Rumble, who is now Oh, he's phenomenal. He's doing absolutely incredible. I mean, his streak is looking good. He's got Mike Kyle on it. He's got that controversial fight with Arlovsky. Yeah, he's looking good. I just hope to see him in the UFC again. It would be a crazy circumstance now, as if he went to the UFC and was able to take that title off John Jones. That'd be the craziest career comeback ever. The circumstances that happened. But no, as for the rest of the fights, I missed them all. I am going to try and check up on the Justin Gaethje fight, as he's now fighting Nick Newell, and I'm quite a fan of Nick Newell. He's quite an enigma. You can't really prepare for that.
Very true. Yeah, he's definitely going to be a much bigger fighter than Gaethje. So I'll have close eyes on that if it does happen. I think Gaethje can't fight until May or June, I believe, and the matchmaker for World Series of Fighting says the fight isn't official because he has to make sure that Newell doesn't want to fight between now and then. But it should be going down Justin Gaethje versus Nick Newell. That will be an incredible fight. Let's move down the line of the news to Shogun versus Dan Henderson 2. That's going to headline the UFC Fight Night card in Brazil on March 23rd. Very easily who you got in the rematch of one of the greatest UFC fights of all time, Shogun versus Dan Henderson, Ray?
First thing I want to say about this fight, I mean, I'm looking forward to this fight because the first fight was so good, but I don't expect the second fight to be anywhere near as good as the first fight. I mean, it's very hard to recreate a first fight. We've had it happen a couple of times, of course. Recently, we had Alvarez and Chandler number 2, and that was just as good as the first one. But then we've had it in the past, like Griffin and Bonner 2, which was a pretty poor fight. Of course, their first fight wasn't. I don't think this fight will be as good. The other thing that's got me on this one is, of course, we saw Hendo get knocked out against Balfour. That's the first time he's been knocked out. We've heard it said before that when a fighter gets knocked out, that might affect him in the future with him being knocked out again. I think we'll see that this time, and I think Shogun will end up knocking out Hendo, probably in more devastating fashion than what Balfour did. So yeah, I don't think it'll be as good as the first fight, and I think Shogun will get a knockout victory over Hendo.
I think they're just trying to sell the fight on the basis of the last fight, which I can understand why they're doing it. It's been a weird few years for the guy since their fight. I mean, Dan Henderson, since that fight, I mean, he's only fought this year. He had the entirety of 2012 off, but this year he actually went 0-3, whereas Shogun himself hasn't looked the best. I mean, just pulling up now, he's gone 2-2. The two wins being TKOs, and the losses being Chael Sonnen and Gustafsson. So you can see where Shogun is in the division. You have no real idea where Dan Henderson is. I don't think either guy's heart is purely fixed in the game right now. It's going to be hard to pick, but I hope it's fun. That's all I can say. I don't want it to take away from the exciting fight there was.
Absolutely. I mean, this fight right here, the first one, like Ray and Jay have both alluded to, it's impossible to do better than that. Of course, you do have, like Ray said, you do have rare examples. Your Frankie Edgar versus Gray Maynard 3, which was arguably just as epic as Edgar Maynard 2. But I mean, for the first fight, there was just so much history behind that going into that fight. The history from Pride. It was really. It had been anticipated for a long time. That was a matchup that should have happened years and years and years before. And when it finally did happen, it was just some kind of epic. So it's really hard to recapture that kind of magic. The career trajectories of both fighters are definitely kind of hard to plot. I would be willing to bet that if Shogun hadn't knocked out James Tahuna, we would all be saying Dan Henderson easily in this fight, especially when you look at their first fight. If their first fight were just a 3-round fight, that would have been an easy decision for Dan Henderson. That would have just been a 3-round mud hole stomping, and there wouldn't have been a second thought about it, and we would all just be picking Hendo again. So, just very tough. But that knockout over Tahuna was so savage, and against such a huge guy. And of course, like it had been mentioned, Hendo suffering that TKO/KO loss to Vitor, which was just savage. That there's so many X factors going into this fight now. It's going to be great either way, though. Definitely pulling for my man Hendo.
Word, yeah, I am too. You all make an awesome point in that no one should expect it to be as good as the first one. I mean, literally, this could go down as the best fight of 2014 and still not be as good as the first. So I'm definitely looking forward to it. These guys are both warriors. They took, I think it was Ramses last night who was saying they both took years off of one another's lives in the first fight, so I don't know if they're necessarily going to want to do that again. Let's move on, though, the last bit of news before we get to the Guess That Tweet, breakdown UFC on Fox 10, and send this out into the internet. Michael Bisping taking on Tim Kennedy. The UFC is apparently aiming to make that fight for the Tough Nations finale on April 16th. Pending a past physical by Michael Bisping, who had a detached retina. His eye was looking all sorts of messed up for a while. He was wearing a patch, but apparently he is on the way to being back. And my question is super simple: will the eye injury affect Bisping? And no pun intended, and I made the same shitty joke on the MMA podcast, but I've got to wait until I see something out of Bisping before I say he's totally back. I mean, MMA, you're so dependent on depth perception, knowing exactly how far away the guy is, where he's throwing a punch from, where he's throwing a kick from. If that eye is even at 70%, I think it's going to be a huge problem. And I don't know, if he really is back at full health, I think he gets through Tim Kennedy pretty easily. But if he isn't, Tim is a very rangy guy, and talk about depth perception. Kennedy won his last fight via lunging left hook. So, yeah, it'll be pretty interesting to see how his eye is doing. Jay, what do you think about the injury? Is your boy Michael Bisping going to be 100% in the cage?
I caught him on a BT Sports show. He was doing some sort of interview. And I don't know, man. He almost looked cross-eyed during that interview. You mentioned about depth perception. I don't know what's going to be happening. I've lost a lot of faith in Bisping. It didn't look good at all. I'm hoping he pulls it off. I'm hoping we see the same Michael Bisping, only because if Anderson Silva does return and he doesn't get this immediate title shot, which I don't think he should, the one fight I think we've always been denied is Anderson Silva versus Michael Bisping. I just think that Michael Bisping will always be in his face. I think Silva will get the knockout, but Bisping won't ever let him find his reach and won't ever let him, start teeing off on him. It'll have to be a one hit. That said, no, I think Bisping won't be the same. I really hope he is, but I think This is Kennedy's to win, I'm afraid.
Jay, I would have to be inclined to agree with you at this point. And Jake, as you had mentioned, MMA is just a game of inches, really. You just have to be that much better than your opponent in every area. Everybody's so close these days, and with an injury that's as scary as a detached retina in any circumstance, let alone when you're in the fight game. We saw Alan Belcher come back from a detached retina. I believe he rattled off a couple wins. I want to say he got his wins over McDonald and Husamar Palhares after coming back from the detached retina. So there is some sort of precedent there for Bisping to come back. And Bisping is such a great fighter. Really, he is. He catches a lot of heat in America. But I'll tell you what, before Michael Bisping got put up against Dan Henderson, America loved Bisping. And I believe deep down in our hearts, America still loves Bisping to a certain degree. And that love is still there for him. And I'm pulling for him to make this comeback. But that having been said, Tim Kennedy, he's really looking good since coming over to the UFC. And just being a game of inches, I think Tim Kennedy has to be just a slight favorite in this, but I'd really love to see Bisping pull it out.
first thing I want to pick up on there on what Patrick said, and of course I love Patrick, but I don't think Tim Kennedy has looked that good since coming to the UFC. I mean, his fight against Roger Gracie was a horrible fight. I mean, neither guy really impressed in that fight, which is why Gracie was cut after the fight. And yeah, he knocked out Natal, and he knocked him out impressively. But again, who is Rafael Natal? I mean, he's not a guy that, you know, Natal's never a top contender. Him beating Natal was as impressive as Rockhold beating Philippou, in my opinion. So I don't think Kennedy has fought anyone great yet to kind of warrant this great big billing. I mean, I think the Bisping-Kennedy fight makes lots of sense, but I don't think Kennedy has put out there yet that he is this big, scary middleweight. I don't think we've seen enough from him yet. I don't know how serious the injury is with Bisping. I can't imagine he'd be cleared to fight if he's still, if it was even still a risk of it being serious, because of how strict the doctors are and things like that, which is good, of course. So I think Bisping will come in and he'll be healthy for this fight. I think Kennedy's a tough fight for Bisping, but I think Bisping's tempo will be enough to see this through. I'll be siding with Bisping to win this fight. I mean, I like Tim Kennedy. I think he's a good guy. I mean, of course, I spoke to him just over a week ago. We talked about Michael Bisping, which was quite cool. But yeah, as much as I like Tim Kennedy, I'll always be rooting for the Brits, and I'll certainly be rooting for Bisping. I think Bisping will win.
Word, it'll definitely be very interesting to see who wins that. And I just realized I think I say that way too much after each topic. I'll think of synonyms for the word interesting and the word definitely. Let's move on, though, to Guess That Tweet. It is the game show sweeping the nation here on the MMA podcast. And yeah, I am hosting. Jay, Ray, and Patrick are going to compete. If you're not familiar, whoever guesses the correct fighter to match it with the tweet gets a point. If none of them guess it right, I get a point for stumping everybody. We've been doing this since day one, and it's actually pretty close between Team MMA Podcast, Team MMA Mental, 21-18. Team MMA Podcast has the edge. And last week, I think Chris won. He's not on the show to defend his title this week, so he will have to pass the belt on to someone else. And this is a UFC on Fox 10 themed tweet. Every possible fighter is going to be fighting this Saturday on UFC on Fox 10 in Chicago, which is the fight we're going to break, the card we're going to break down after Guess That Tweet. Jay, Ray, Patrick, are you fellas ready?
Of course.
Ready?
Alright, let's start it up. The first tweet. Do you believe in aliens? And if so, why or what's your story? I'm interested to know. I've been fascinated about this. Be open and honest. Go. Who tweeted that out? Was it Darren Elkins, Jeremy Stevens, Sergio Pettis, or Alex Bruce Leroy Caceres? Jay?
Am I up first? I guess I will go with... I don't see it being Sergio Pettis for some reason. I'll go with Alex Karalexis.
Alex Caceres?
That's the one, yeah, same person.
Ray?
Complete guess, but I'll go with Sergio Pettis.
Yeah, I love the tweet. I could see it. Oh, gosh. Who was the first one, Jake?
Darren Elkins?
Darren Elkins. I want to say he's sponsored by Alienware. I don't know. Although I could see that being Alex Caceres, but I'll roll the dice on Darren Elkins.
Well, it was not Darren Elkins, P-Money. It was not Sergio Pettis, Ray. It was not Alex Caceres, Jay. It was Jeremy Stevens. Point goes to the host. I stumped all of you. And we'll move on to the second tweet. We have 5 tweets, and if it's still tied after 5, we have one overtime tweet to get to. Tweet number 2. The moment I stop having fun with it, I'll be done with it. Hashtag I'm having a blast. Hashtag fun lifestyle. Was it Sergio Pettis, Alex Caceres, Darren Cruikshank, or Mike Rio? Patrick?
Damn it, Jake! You're throwing the heat tonight. Oh boy, I'll go with Mike Rio.
I'll go with Alex Bruce Leroy.
Can you read them out again? I'll try and pick somebody who hasn't been said by one of these two, as in the fighters.
Sergio Pettis, Alex Caceres, Darren Cruikshank, or Mike Rio?
I'm going to go with Darren Elkins. Did you say him?
I did not say Darren Elkins. Darren Cruikshank.
I'll go with Darren Cruikshank. I'll go with Cruikshank. My bad. Darren, whoever.
Well, P-Money, it was not Mike Rio. Ray, it was not Alex Caceres. Jay, it was not Derek Cruikshank. This was Sergio Pettis. Once again, the point goes to the host. I got 2 points. Everybody's got 0. I don't think the host has ever won, even though we've been doing it for a while. So hell yeah, let's see if the host can win this one. Next tweet, very simple. It's a simple 5-word tweet. Has anyone farted yet tonight? Has anyone farted yet tonight? Who tweeted that? Was it Darren Cruikshank, Mike Rio, Stipe Miocic, or Donald Cerrone? Jay?
I swear I saw this. Did I? Was it Donald Cerrone? I'm going to go with Stipe Miocic.
I can't imagine it being Miocic because I spoke to him and he hasn't really got much of a sense of humor. I'm going to go with Darren Cruikshank.
Wow. You know what? I'm going with Mike Rio again. He's got to be on here for a reason.
Well, guys, I hate to say it. Patrick, it wasn't Mike Rio. Ray, it wasn't Darren Cruikshank. Jay, it was Stipe Miocic. You get the point, and you get a little bit closer to my 2 points. Ray and Patrick still with 0. Let's get to tweet number 4. Who thinks Ronda Rousey looked like Chucky as she was walking out? This was tweeted during UFC 168, Rousey versus Tate. Who thinks Ronda Rousey looked like Chucky as she was walking out? Was it Walt, the Big Ticket Harris? Was it Josh Thomson? Was it Darren Cruikshank? Or was it Mike Rio?
Jake, I hate you. I want to pick Mike Rio so bad. Also, come on, this was tweeted out live during UFC 168. That was almost a month ago, bro. Jesus Christ, I'll go with Harris.
I'll go with Josh to the Punk.
I'll go with Cruikshank.
It was not Mike Rio. It was not Josh the Punk. It was not the Big Ticket. It was Darren Cruikshank. Jay ties it up. 2 points apiece. Puts Ray and Patrick out of contention, I do believe. So he has a chance to beat me on this last tweet, which is...
I'm hoping one of the others get it. I'm hoping one of you two get it just to sort this out.
Had my hashtag coffee now ready to train. I don't know how people start their day without coffee. It's a must for me. So this guy is a coffee drinker. Was it Darren Cruikshank? Was it Mike Rio? Was it Eddie Wineland? Or was it Darren Elkins?
I kind of want to go with Mike Rio just because P-Money seems like it's going to be an inevitability. But I guess I'll take a stab with Darren Elkins.
I'll go with Mike Rio.
Fucking hey, God damn it. I'm going with Cruikshank.
Well, it was not Darren Cruikshank. It was not Mike Rio.
Oh, man.
So it was either Wineland or Elkins. If it was Wineland, I win the game the first time the host has ever won. If it was Darren Elkins, Jay wins the game. It was Darren Elkins. Jay, congratulations. Do you have a victory speech?
I haven't prepared actually, but fair play, Jake. You came the closest any host has ever come. But just like Travail's management sim, you have lost twice in a row. So
Jay cheated.
I did not cheat. I don't even know how I could cheat at that. This is the thing. But thanks, guys. Thanks.
Alright, we will do the overtime one just for fun. Got the house all to myself today. Hashtag I need friends. Who was it, Jay?
Mike Rio.
Cruikshank, Elkins, Stevens, or Pettis?
Elkins.
Mike Rio anyway.
Mike Rio.
Who did you say? Read them off again.
Cruikshank, Elkins, Stevens, or Pettis?
I'm going to go with Pettis.
Ray?
Elkins.
P. Money.
Yeah, I'm going with Pettis as well. He's like 12 years old, so that excites him, having the house to himself.
And that is actually excellent logic. It was Sergio Pettis for the overtime tweet. Jay had it nailed. Got all of the last 4 or 3 of the last 4, whatever it was. Congrats, Jay. Let's move on to the UFC on Fox 10 preview. We're going to break that down before we send it off. First, I kind of want to break down the first 7 fights all in a big clump, because I don't know, none of them really leap out as something we gotta specify and get really deep into. I do want to break down all 4 fights on the main card one by one, though. The prelims, we're gonna have 1 fight on the UFC Fight Pass. The big ticket, Walt Harris taking on Nikita Krylov. Harris a big favorite there. On the prelims, we got a welterweight fight, George Sullivan versus Mike Rhodes, a lightweight fight, Darren Cruikshank versus Mike Rio, and 4 bantamweight fights. We're going to see a lot of sorting out in that division. Junior Hernandez taking on Hugo Wolverine Viana, Chico Camus taking on Yautzin Meza, Eddie Wineland taking on Yves Jabouin, and Bruce Leroy Caceres taking on Sergio Pettis. Which fights stand out to you all? I'll start off with Pat. What do you think about those prelims?
Well, I'll tell you the one that really has to stand out for myself and Ray and Jay, I'm sure, and that's Mike Rhodes. Biggie Rhodes getting into the UFC. When I first got together with Ray and started doing the MMA mental thing, we had a show coming up, and he said, you know what, we got this guy coming on the show. He's training out of Rufus Sport. He's like, I think he was like 4-0 at the time. And he said, you know what, this guy's going to go some places. I pulled up some videos of him, was watching his fights. I said, man, you know what, this guy, he's a good prospect. And sure enough, here he is breaking in to the UFC. His only losses to Brandon Thatch, and we've seen what Brandon Thatch has gone on to do in the UFC. Got very ghetto there for a second. Gone on to done.
Gone on to done, son.
You know what he gone on to done. Mike Rhodes, he's gone on recently. His last fight was a 25-minute decision win in RFA. Very solid showing. So much love for Biggie Rhodes. That's what I'm looking forward to on the prelims.
Yeah, if I was thinking out one prelim, for the same reason I'm picking Mike Rhodes. I mean, I think I spoke to Mike Rhodes for the first time probably close to 18 months ago. And he messaged me on Twitter and said, will you interview me? And if you do, I'll get you an interview with my roommate, who's Eric Koch. And at the time, Eric Koch was scheduled to fight Jose Aldo. I mean, regardless, I would have interviewed Mike Rhodes anyway. But he was true to his word. He set me up with an interview with Eric Koch. He also set me up with an interview with Dustin Ortiz before he made the UFC as well. So yeah, certainly looking forward to that. That's my one that I'm looking forward to the most, but that's more for personal reasons. Because of what I've seen Mike Rhodes do over the last 18 months. And I've talked to him a few times, and he's always said, I'm not taking the tough route, I want to earn my way in, and that's what he's done. But we're looking away from that fight. The other ones that jump out to me, I'm looking forward to seeing Sergio Pettis, because I think he's going to do big things. Wineland and Jabouin looks like it's going to be a stand-up fight, and I think there'll be a knockout in that fight. And Cruikshank Rio, just because I liked that season of Tough. It was one of my favourite seasons. Tough Life was a great season. And I think we've all interacted with Darren Cruikshank, and he's such a fun guy to chat with. So I'm looking forward to that fight as well.
Rose should be a good fight. Like Ray said, with the Eric Koch, I got to speak to him a long time back. I guess I'm looking forward to Walter Harris putting a beating on Nikita. That should be a good one. But overall, yeah, Sergio Pettis and Mike Rhodes, seeing those Rufus boys do work, that should be... not Rufus boys, but seeing those two do work should be fun.
They are both Rufus boys.
I thought so. Something in my head was saying, do it. But then all of
Yeah,
a sudden
they
I
both
backed
are.
out.
They
I
both
backed
are.
out like a pussy.
Yeah, they both are.
Well, I'm looking forward to the lightweight scrap between Darren Cruikshank and Mike Rio. I think Darren's just going to be stuffing takedowns all day, staying at range to beat the other tough alumnus. Let's move on to the main card, a featherweight bout between Darren Elkins and Jeremy Stephens. I actually think both of these guys are pretty underrated. Darren Elkins, you look at his record, he really only seems to lose to the best, and this UPS guy won't stop ringing my doorbell. Too bad, UPS guy, I'm doing a podcast. He's 7-2 since joining the UFC. He actually started off his career beating Dwayne Ludwig back at that UFC Live Vera versus Jones card in March 2010. Since then, he's only lost twice to Charles Oliveira and Chad Mendes back in April 20th at that UFC on Fox 7 card. He bounced back and beat Hatsu Hiyoki, though. Jeremy Stephens, he's also bouncing back from a three fight losing streak to Tony Pettis, Donald Cerrone, and Yves Edwards. He went undefeated in 2010, defeating Esteban Payon and Ronnie Jason via head kick just a few months ago in November. What do you think about the fight? I'm actually really stoked for it. Not many people are talking about it, but like I said, I think both of these guys are underrated as hell. I'll start off with you, Ray. Elkins, Stephens, what are your thoughts?
I think it's a great matchup. I think both of these guys have both been exciting featherweight fighters. I always look forward to seeing Elkins fight. He looks like a different fighter at featherweight to when he was at lightweight. He was hit and miss at lightweight, but he's been very consistent at featherweight. Jeremy Stephens in his last fight, especially against Honey Jason. I mean, what he did to Honey Jason was so impressive, because Honey Jason's tough, but Stephens just smashed him. I'm not sure which way I'm going with this. Whether I've got Elkins lying on, taking Stephens down and controlling him and winning via decision, or whether Stephens lands that one punch and gets the finish. I'm kind of siding with Elkins controlling Stephens for 3 rounds. I don't think Elkins will put Stephens away, but Stephens only needs to land once, and he's good enough to do that. I'm going to go Elkins by decision, but I wouldn't be surprised either way. But I am excited for this fight.
A lot of people are saying that this Stephens has got a major chance. I just see him getting put on his back. I mean, that's just the way I see it. Correct me if I'm wrong, but Sam Stout, wasn't he able to take down Jeremy Stephens at will?
I was super drunk for that fight.
Yeah, I think he was. I mean, he mixed it up a bit with striking, but I think Elkins should be able to lie on him for the 15 minutes.
Well, personally, I'm going to have to go with Jeremy Stephens in this. I just think Stephens is relatively young, if I'm not mistaken. And I feel like he's just gotten better with this drop to featherweight. Really, it doesn't look like he's lost a step. It looks like he's got the quickness to handle some of these guys. I mean, of course, Honey Jason may not necessarily be known for his speed, but certainly on the same level that Darren Elkins will be thrown at you. So Darren Elkins, of course, you can't understate what the drop to 145 pounds has done for him. I'd say he's definitely more underrated than Jeremy Stephens. But I feel like Stephens will be the more athletic fighter in this. I feel just based on that, I think he will be able to just stay away from Elkins, who's a bigger featherweight, but I think that will work against him. I just think Jeremy Stephens has found his home here at 145, and I think he's going to put some of that nasty power on Elkins.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I'm looking at the Vegas lines for all the fights on this card, and there are not a lot of close fights. Actually, every favorite on the card is a favorite of minus 200 or more, except for Sergio Pettis and Jeremy Stephens, who are both minus 170, and those are supposedly the 2 closest fights on the card. According to Vegas, Pettis versus Caceres and Elkins versus Stephens. Every other fight, the favorite is minus 200, all the way out to minus 415 for Walt the Big Ticket Harris over Nikita Krylov. And talking about these mismatches, actually, Donald Cerrone, Stipe Miocic, and Benson Henderson are all around minus 260 or 270, which is pretty interesting. Just to note that all three of those guys are huge favorites, and that does bring us to the next fight. Donald Cowboy Cerrone taking on Adriano Martins. Cerrone coming off that win at UFC 167 to Evan Dunham. He's sort of been on a win-loss tear of late. Beat Melvin Guillard at UFC 150, lost to Anthony Pettis, beat KJ Nunes, lost to Rafael Dos Anjos, and now is coming off a win against Evan Dunham. Adriano Martins made his UFC debut. Sorry, I'm pulling up his record now. He made his debut in the UFC this past November against Darren Cruikshank. He had also fought once in Strikeforce in January, defeating George Gurgel, and he's now on a 6-fight winning streak. I think the main difference here is Cerrone has fought a ton of guys as good or better than his opponent. His opponent, on the other hand, has not fought many people as good as Cerrone, so I think we see Cerrone really overpower Martins here and win via. I think he could win standing up with strikes. He could win on the ground with his grappling via submission. But I'm going to call a first or second round TKO here. What do you guys think?
Oh man, I just spoke about a whole 2 sentences. My bad. The interesting thing about Martins is he's got a black belt in jiu-jitsu as well as a brown belt in judo. So if it goes down to grappling, he should have enough skills to hold himself. He also won his last fight he took the fight. I think he took it on late notice, and either way, whether he did or he didn't, he definitely took away the submission and the night bonus. It should be a fun fight, but I just see Cerrone. I think he realizes his potential. I think in the Rafael Dos Anjos fight, he really looked and thought he's got to start thinking. He's got to start thinking more. He can't just take his opponents lightly. He said himself he didn't even really know who Rafael Dos Anjos is, and you have to be a fan of the sport in order to compete at the high level, and I think that's what he's gone away and done. Admittedly, this is one of the guys at the lower end of the division, but I think he'll come out there and try his best, and I think he'll probably get the finish.
I have to agree. I'm thinking we all know Cerrone's style. He's got the great kickboxing, which usually he ends up rocking his opponent and then getting the drop sub, as we like to say. I have to go with Donald Cerrone in this simply because of my own ignorance of Martins. I'm not familiar with him, as ashamed as I am to say that. But straight up, if you ask me, hey, who are you going to pick in this fight, Donald Cerrone or some guy you're not familiar with? I'm picking Donald Cerrone all day. I mean, we all know what he's capable of. And, so I'm picking the Cowboy. I'd say probably drop sub.
This was a strange matchup for me. I mean, Donald Cerrone looked really, really good in his last fight against Devin Dunham. I mean, not only did he beat Dunham, but I'm pretty sure he became the first person to submit Dunham as well. And we've seen Dunham in there with some high-level guys. It was a really, really, excellent performance. Adriano Martins, for me, hasn't done enough to warrant a fight with Donald Cerrone. That's just my humble opinion. So I'm always excited to watch Cerrone fight because he's always exciting. I'm not as excited for this fight just because I don't know the opponent that well, but I've got Cerrone to win. As how I don't know yet. I've got to look into that and see what I'm going to go with. But I'm certainly going for Cerrone to win.
Yeah, I really like Cerrone. That he's a very active fighter and probably took the fight just because he wants to fight a bunch in 2014. Fought 5 times in 2011, all under the UFC banner. Fought 4 times in 2013, all under the UFC banner. So he likes staying active, fighting a bunch. It just came out that he apparently is broke. He likes to spend money just as fast as he earns it. Apparently, he said. So he'll fight a bunch and keep on spending it. A lot of people hate him. He's definitely got a pretty boisterous personality, but he's from Colorado. I can't hate on him. Let's move on to the co-main event. Gabe Gonzaga taking on Stipe Miocic. Like I mentioned in Vegas, Miocic a huge favorite here. He's coming off that really career win over Roy Nelson back at UFC 161. Before that, he had lost to Stefan Struve. That's his only loss. He's 10-1. He really was going into that fight against Roy Nelson as an underdog, but he wiped the floor with him for 15 minutes back at that fight in Winnipeg. Gabe he lost to Travis Brown back at that TUF 17 finale in April. It was a quick fight first round, but his last 2 fights have also been quick, defeating Dave Herman and Sean Jordan via KO. Herman in 17 seconds, Jordan in a minute 33. What do you guys think about this fight? I don't know if I think Miocic should be that much of a favorite. I still think he's going to win. The only thing I know about this fight, it's going to end early. Both of these guys are going to be swinging. What do you guys think, Ray? Or, sorry, Pat?
Well, I agree. I think the lines are a little off in this one. I don't know that Miocic should be minus 200 and that Gonzaga should be plus 200 in this fight.
He's actually minus 270.
Oh, wow. The lines must really be moving on that one. Last time I checked, I want to say it was like minus 200, but maybe I'm tripping. I know, like you said, all the fights on UFC on Fox 10 are coming in at least around that for the betting lines. Be that as it may, like you said, Gonzaga, his only loss as of late is to Travis Brown, who's just been on quite a spree. He's really living up to his potential, but that was what has become Travis Brown's patented move, the elbow you in the head until you go unconscious when you're trying to take me down move. That Gonzaga had fell victim to that. I don't believe we'll see something like that from Miocic. Just because of the way their sizes match up in this fight. But Gonzaga, you really can't sleep on his striking. You can't sleep on his power. I mean, his last 2 opponents, you would think he would be going for the submission in these fights because his submissions are just as dangerous as his striking. So this is just a very interesting fight. Miocic, of course, Golden Gloves, NCAA Division I wrestling background. Very, very tough fight to call, but I'm going with Gonzaga in this one.
I think this is a great matchup. I think Gonzaga's much more explosive than what Miocic is. But I think Stipe Miocic, he's a lot more composed. He loves to find his range with his boxing. I mean, he picked Nelson apart for 15 minutes, and because Nelson doesn't necessarily hide his shots while he's able to see them coming and get out of the way. And of course, once you get past that first round and a half with Nelson, he's going to struggle. But Miocic, he's got cardio for days. He looked really, really good in that fight. Gonzaga, I've been impressed with Gonzaga. He's looked really good. The only fight I weren't impressed with, if I think I've got this right, was his win over Ben Rothwell, which was just a horrible, horrible fight, and he won with a guillotine. But neither guy looked good in that fight. I think Miocic will pick Gonzaga apart and we'll get a knockout. But then I'm also, you can't rule Gonzaga out. I mean, we all remember, of course, when Gonzaga faced Krokop. I know it was a while ago, but Krokop was his composed striker, and Gonzaga completely smashed him. So yeah, I think Miocic will win, but I think it's a tough fight. But I think Miocic will win by knockout.
Ray nailed a few points right there. I think Stipe will pick him apart and get the knockout. Probably get the knockout in the second round. Yes, if Gonzaga gets it to the mat, he'll have him his round. But Miocic's got some rest of the man. He did a good job on Joey Beltran, and I think he's just too much for this point in Gonzaga's career.
Word up. Well, we got one more fight to get to before we wrap it up. But first, let's bring you the stat of the day on that fight.
Start of the day! Start of the day! Start of the day! Start of the day! Here comes the start of the day!
Former champions Benson Henderson and Josh Thomson will talk a ton about standing up with one another, but the wrestling will be the key in this one. Josh Thomson has taken down 11 of his last 14 opponents, while Benson has taken down all but 2 of his opponents since joining the UFC. That's your stat of the day.
Start of the day! Start of the day! Start of the day! Here comes the start of the day!
And this one. Benson Henderson, former UFC champion, taking on Josh Thomson, former Strikeforce champion. And you look at both of their records. I mean, God, talk about having a really good win-loss record. Benson is 19-3. Really, his only losses coming to Anthony Pettis. He's beaten every single other person you've thrown in front of him. Josh Thomson sort of has the same problem with Gilbert Melendez, even though he did have that one loss to Tatsuya Kawajiri back in Japan in 2010. But Thomson and Benson are sort of coming off of opposite trajectories. I made this same point last night on the MMA podcast. Josh Thomson lost to Gil Melendez. His stock, was sort of going down a little bit, coming off a loss in his last Strikeforce fight. Came into the UFC, was an underdog against Nate Diaz, and just put it to Nate. Really skyrocketed his stock up. Benson was coming off a win against Gil Melendez. People were talking about him being top 5 or top 10, if not top 5 pound for pound in the world. But then he went out to and fought Anthony Pettis back at UFC 164 in Milwaukee, lost the UFC lightweight strap. I think currently Benson is ranked number 1 in the UFC lightweight division. Thompson's number 4. The winner of this fight is definitely going to be in good position to either fight for the belt next or be just a fight away from fighting for the belt. What do you guys think about this? Benson Henderson versus Josh the Punk Thomson. Ray, who you got?
My favourite division, much like Jay's, is the welterweight division. My favourite division is the lightweight division, and I especially love the top end of the lightweight division. For me, this is a fantastic matchup. Benson Henderson, Josh Thomson. I don't care what the rest of this card is. For me, I'd be excited for this event just for this one fight. I mean, I like the rest of the card, but this one fight sells the whole event for me. It's a really hard fight to pick. I think Benson's going to be looking to grapple Josh. I think Josh is going to be looking to keep the fight standing and strike. I'm going to go for the upset. I'm going to go for Thomson. I mean, they've both looked great in recent fights. I know Henderson lost, of course, to Pettis, but before that, he was looking good. Some of their similar opponents, the one that jumps out at me is Nate Diaz. Henderson controlled and dominated Nate Diaz for 25 minutes. Josh Thomson smashed Nate Diaz. I mean, literally, he took his head off with that kick. I'll rewatch the fight again recently because it was the UFC posted it out. Yeah, I'm going to go for Thomson for the upset, and I think we'll see Thomson versus Pettis this year as well if Thomson gets this win.
Josh Thomson came out with Nate Diaz with a point to prove, man. The crowd he was fighting his hometown. This is the thing that I think really wound him up. He's fighting in his hometown. This was his one, this was his one chance. He's fighting out of San Jose, California. The fight was at San Jose, California. Nate Diaz was getting all the respect in the world, whereas people were booing Josh Thomson. I think Josh Thomson was fired up, and he's really, he had a fire lit up underneath his arse, or whatever that expression is. He just came out and absolutely put a beating on Nate Diaz, and he walked out rightfully with that win. He just looked on another level that night. But Benson Henderson, he has a way of making any sort of fighter just question what they're doing in there, just pushing them against the wall, keeping them at distance, whatever he does. He's exceptional at doing it. And the thing with Josh Thomson is he should bring a war to Benson, and that's something that we haven't really seen Benson ever get involved in. The few times we have seen it, Anthony Pettis in the first fight. Other than that, maybe Clay Guida in moments of that fight. But outside of that, Benson Henderson has really looked like he's just been almost cruising in there. I think whatever happens, in my opinion, the UFC shouldn't give Benson a title shot until he gets a finish. It seems like that's his kryptonite right now. He's fought a lot of good guys, but I think that would really sell him and make him marketable. But either way, I'm excited for this fight, and it is the right fight for Benson Henderson to take, a guy who could finish him.
This really fantastic main event. Josh Thomson and Benson Henderson, they're so similar in that they're so versatile. They both have great all-around mixed martial arts games, and they're both at the top echelon of the game. And the UFC's lightweight division is one of the most competitive divisions in the whole organization and potentially in all of mixed martial arts. It's probably the deepest there is. Having said that, I think I'm going with Thomson for the upset as well. I just think his game is just a little more diverse, if you will. His striking game, I just like it a little bit better. I think it's it's tough saying that his striking is better than Benson Henderson, who's of course been a lifelong martial artist in his own right. He has that Taekwondo background he's coming from. But you look at, like it was mentioned, their common opponent in Nate Diaz, and Thomson just dismantled him. I think he's got that killer instinct, and he's going to be going for it. Not to say that Benson Henderson doesn't have that, but again, he has not won by any other method other than decision in his UFC career. I think Thomson, obviously, he can go 25, and I think he very well may go 25 with Benson Henderson, and I think he's just going to be able to edge it out. But then again, having said that, that just makes me think Benson Henderson is going to win because I can never pick his fights right. So,
Word, we shall see. Saturday night, that main card starts on Fox at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. And yeah, Pat, I totally side with you as far as never being able to pick a Bindo fight correctly. And when I expect the fight to end in the first round, it usually goes the distance. When I say a fight's going to go the distance, it usually ends in the first round. But this episode of the MMA Roundtable, it went the full distance. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for supporting the show. As always, you can listen to the show on Tuesday afternoons. You can follow us on Twitter at the MMA Podcast. We do our show on Monday nights. Also follow our buddy Ramses at the Aunt Jimmy Show. He does the Word on the Street show on Tuesday nights. We always have fun guests on there. Check out Ray. Ray, where do we find you on Twitter and all that good stuff? Where do we find all those interviews you've been doing recently too?
Yeah, check me out. Follow me on Twitter. It's at MMA Mental. I've got my own YouTube channel, so check out the MMA Mental YouTube channel. All my interviews are posted on the following pages on Facebook: UFC Live and MMA Fighting. Also writing and getting my interviews published on yourmma.tv, which is a website based in the UK covering MMA all over the world. So yeah, check all those places out to keep an eye on what I'm doing.
If you're trying to find the hottest twink in the UK, Jay Jeans, where can we find you?
I think I'm on Twitter. I think it's J_Jeans, something like that. One day I'm going to get that changed, but for now, if you want to find me and you want to chat to me about absolutely anything, I'm pretty good in most situations. If you ask me conversations, I can normally answer your question. That is at J_Jeans. Ask me anything. I'll see what I can do.
P Money, where do we find you on the Twitters? Any other shout outs as well?
yes, thank you, gentlemen. You can follow me on Twitter at Sweet Pappy Jones. We can talk about anything from drink milk to on the beach. We can talk about fights, or we can talk about grooming your pet dog. Maybe how to properly milk their anal glands. I don't know. Whatever it is, follow me at Sweet Pappy Jones.
Yo, if you're trying to milk a dog's ass, follow him on Twitter at Sweet Pappy Jones. Jay, once again, is at J_Jeans. Ray is at MMA Mental, and definitely follow the YouTube channel. He's got interviews with tons of UFC fighters, MMA personalities. I actually do listen to those in my spare time, just because Ray actually does ask the real questions. No bullshit. Thank you once again, the MMA Podcast. You can find us, themmapodcast.com. Up at the top, you have some tabs. You can find us on iTunes and YouTube by clicking those tabs, or just go to the iTunes or the YouTubes and typing in the MMA Podcast. We appreciate the shit out of each and every one of you. Definitely make sure you catch that UFC on Fox card on Fox this Saturday 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific. We love the shit out of you. We'll see you next week for the MMA podcast. We'll see you next week for the MMA Roundtable. We'll see you later tonight on the Word on the Street podcast. That is at the Aunt Jimmy Show if you want to follow him on Twitter. We love the shit out of you. Till next week, we gone.
We did it.